What is linguistic? You know that linguistics is the scientific study of language, and speaker sends a message using the language or information to listener, and listener decodes the message. On the other hand, speaker encodes the message. So what the listener listen, and when he or she decodes the message, it is comprised of a process, and this process is included in psycholinguistics. Well, dear student, as you all know that linguistics comprised of phonetic and phonology, and it deals with the sentence structure like morphology and syntax, and it also deals with semantic and pragmatics. You know that computational linguistics is the scientific and engineering discipline concerned with understanding written and spoken language from a computational perspective. On the other hand, historical linguistics study the history of language. Then we have sociolinguistics, and today we are going to study psycholinguistics. As you all know that linguistics is the scientific study of language, while psychology is the scientific study of mind. So psycholinguistics is the combination of both of these two studies, and you can say that it's a hybrid form of psychology and linguistics, in which we study scientifically the language as well as mind. Okay, let's discuss further what is linguistics. Linguistics is the structural component of a language, and in psycholinguistics the object is speech process and language is served as a process. As far as the branches of linguistics are concerned, we have language processing, language acquisition, and neurolinguistics, which we would be studying further. Okay, as far as the origin of psycholinguistics is concerned, the origin of the term psycholinguistics was coined in 1963 by Jacob Robert Cantor in his book An Objective Psychology of Grammar, and started being used among his team at Indiana University. But its use finally became frequent thanks to the 1964 article, and the article name is Language and Psycholinguistics, a Review, by his student Nicholas Pronko, where it was used for the first time to talk about an interdisciplinary science that could be coherent, as well as in the title of Psycholinguistics, and that is a survey of theory and research problems, a 1954 book by Charles E. Osgood and Thomas A. Sabeck. Well, let's discuss some of the definitions of psycholinguistics. The very first is, it investigates the interrelation of language. लैंग्वेज की जो इंटर रिलेशन है उसको इन्वेस्टिगेट करती है साइकोलिंग्विस्टिक्स, एंड माइंड इन प्रोसेसिंग एंड प्रोड्यूसिंग utterances and in language acquisition, and this definition is given by Hartley in 1982. On the other hand, we have another definition, that is, it deals directly with the processes of encoding and decoding as they relate states of messages to states of communicators. And this definition is given by Osgood and Seaborg in 1983, and I have discussed in the beginning of this lecture as well that it is directly the process of encoding and decoding of the messages. Then we have another definition, and according to this definition, psycholinguistics is the study of language acquisition and linguistic behavior, as well as the psychological mechanism responsible for them. We have some other definitions, like it is concerned in the broadest sense with the relation between the messages and the characteristics of the human individual who select and interpret them. Another definition is it is the study of relation between our needs for expression and communication and the means offered to us by a language learned in one's चाइल्डहुड एंड लेटर. सो डियर स्टूडेंट, आपने इस तमाम डेफिनेशन नोट डाउन कर लेनी है और इसको अपनी असाइनमेंट्स में भी मेंशन करना है. नाउ वी कैन से दैट इट इज़ द स्टडी ऑफ द लैंग्वेज बिहेवियर, हाउ रियल रादर देन आइडियल people learn and use language to communicate ideas. Moreover, it asks the questions such as how is language produced, perceived, comprehended and remembered, and how it is used for different communicative purposes, how it is acquired, and how does it go wrong when it is represented in the mind. Psycholinguistics is the study of the language processing mechanism. It deals with the mental processes a person uses in producing and understanding language. It is concerned with the relationship between language and human mind. For example, how word, sentences and discourse meaning are represented and computed in the mind. It is all related to psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistics is a branch of study which combines the disciplines of psychology and linguistics. It is concerned with the relationship between human mind and the language as it examines the process that occur while producing and perceiving both written and spoken discourse. Psycholinguistics as a separate branch of study emerged in the late 1950s. So note down this point that in 1950s as a separate branch psycholinguistics emerged. Now we can definitely say that based on the definition which we have discussed earlier, here are some views on psycholinguistics. The very first is psycholinguistics deal with the language and mind. Second, we can say that psycholinguistics is directly related to the process of encoding and decoding of the message. Then we can say that it is an approach. It investigates language use and the language changes. It discusses the processes which are going on in the speaker's and hearer's mind or the listener's mind. It focuses in the discussion of language acquisition and linguistic behavior. Well, as far as the sub-disciplines within psycholinguistics are concerned, here we have some of the branches. The very first is theoretical psycholinguistics. It based on the language theories related to human mental processes in using language like phonological, diction, syntax, discourse and intonation arrangement. Second, we have development psycholinguistics. It is the process of language acquisition, both L1 and L2. Either it is your first language or second language. And psycholinguistic is the social aspect of language, that language is a string of thought and insight. Next is educational psycholinguistics. It contains the educational aspects in formal education, like the role of language in the teaching of reading and language proficiency. Neuropsycholinguistics. It is the relation between language and the brain. As the word neuro is visible over here, neuro means related to brain. So what happens to language input and how output is programmed and formed inside the brain. Then experimental psycholinguistic क्या होती है? The act and effect of using language. It is called experimental psycholinguistic, and applied psycholinguistic mean the application of all above subfield into other subject. जब हम इन तमाम subfields को दूसरे subject में apply करते हैं, so that study is called applied psycholinguistics. As far as the cognitive process involved, so we are going to study further that what cognitive processes are involved in the ordinary use of language, and how do we understand a lecture, read a book, hold a conversation. And as far as the cognitive processes are concerned, here we have perception, memory, thinking and learning. Well, now here is a question that when is psycholinguistics studied? क्या हम इसको कब study करते हैं? So, well, dear students, psycholinguistic research started as far back as Plato, who was interested in human knowledge and language. However, it became a concern in linguistics during the second half of 19th century. So, second half of 19th century, as I have already mentioned, it is very important as per the development of psycholinguistic studies is concerned. And this second half of 19th century with linguists looking at a language acquisition. In 1960s, Charles Hockett published a list of designed features of human language, where he identified 13 different features that the language we use to communicate as human is characterized by. In the late 20th century, when William Lavelet did a great deal of study on what he called the mental lexicon. ठीक है, विलियम, ये आपने याद रखना है बच्चे, द विलियम लैवलेट की जो स्टडी है दैट इज द मेंटल lexicon. His work has become more prominent in recent years, especially his research into speech production. Since 1990s, the advances in brain scanning and mapping have provided new information for psycholinguistics, meaning we can now see brain activity relating to word processing comprehension. Now the second question is, where is psycholinguistics studied? कि इसको कहाँ स्टडी किया जाता है, वो कौन सी डोमेन है, वो कौन सी फील्ड्स हैं? So the very first we are going to study is psycholinguistic research is not limited to a particular area. किसी खास एरिया तक ये limited नहीं है in the world, but there is more evidence of psycholinguistic study in Western world due to advanced science and technology. As far as the scope is concerned, as this is very important point in your syllabus outline, that what is the scope of psycholinguistic. So you can clearly mention that how language is acquired and produced by the user and how brain works on language. कि हम इसको तब भी यूज़ करते हैं कि किस तरह से ब्रेन वर्क करता है किसी भी लैंग्वेज पर. एंड व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट लैंग्वेज एक्विजिशन, so we depends on psycholinguistic and difference between the children language acquisition and language learning. Moreover, we use psycholinguistic in linguistic interference and language development and the role of motivation in foreign language learning. Moreover, we can add that language process and linguistic knowledge. What knowledge of language is needed for us to use language, यानी कि किस किस्म का हमारे पास knowledge होना चाहिए जब हम language को use करते हैं. So psycholinguistic is always there to help us in that regard. Then tactic knowledge, how to perform, and explicit knowledge means process or mechanism. So this is all these fields are related to the scope of psycholinguistics. As far as general psychological mechanism is concerned, both comprehension and production of language are performed within the constraint of our information processing system. The system consists of structural component, वो system जिसमें component हो, memory system हो, along with the set of control processes that govern the flow of information within the system. वो हमारा क्या कहलाता है? Psychological mechanism कहलाता है. There are three primary processes of investigating in psycholinguistics. The very first is language comprehension. Then we have language production, and the third one is language acquisition. Now we are going to discuss one by one all of three. So as far as language comprehension is concerned, we can say that understanding what other people say and write. इस चीज़ को समझना कि दूसरे लोग क्या कहते हैं और क्या लिखते हैं. It is called language comprehension, and it is more complicated than it might at first appear. Comprehending language involves a variety of capacities like skills, processes, knowledge, and dispositions that are used to derive meaning from spoken, written, and signed languages. Comprehension is mainly thought to occur in the vernix area of the brain, which is located in the left temporal lobe. Language comprehension is a complex process. ये आपने बात समझ लें कि language process is not an easy process that occurs easily. Well, in this second part of our lecture, we are going to discuss that language comprehension. So language comprehension is the understanding what other people say and write, and it is called language comprehension or understanding, and it is more complicated than it might at first appear. Comprehending language involves a variety of capacities, skills, processes, knowledge, and disposition that are used to derive meaning from spoken, written, and signed languages. Comprehension is mainly thought to occur in the vernix area of the brain, which is located in the left temporal lobe. Language comprehension is a complex process that occurs easily and effortlessly by humans. It develops along with the brain, and it is able to be enhanced with the use of gestures. Second point is language production. So as far as language production is concerned, language production is the production of spoken or written language. ठीक है, ये spoken और written language दोनों की जो है वो production है, and it describes all of the stages between having a correct and translating that concept into linguistic form. As far as the stages of production are concerned, we can add that the basic loop occurring in the creation of language consists of the some of the steps like intended message, encoding message into linguistic form, then encode linguistic form into speech, उसको एक motor system में ले आना, then sound goes from speaker's mouth to listener's ears, जिसको हम auditory system कहते हैं कि सुनने वाले ने वो बात सुन ली, then speech is decoded into linguistic form. Linguistic form is decoded into meaning. Next, our point is language acquisition. So language acquisition is the process by which humans acquire the capacity to perceive and comprehend language, as well as to produce and use words and sentences to communicate. Language acquisition usually refers to first language acquisition, which studies infants' acquisition of their native language. Well, this is distinguished from second language acquisition, which deals with the acquisition in both children and adults of additional languages. Language acquisition is just one strand of psycholinguistics, which is all about how people learn to speak and the mental processes involved. The information processing system, like we can say that it depends on serial versus parallel processing. top down versus bottom down processing, automatic and controlled processes, and modulatory versus interactivity, development of processing system. Language comprehension we have already discussed, and as far as the perception of language, we have discussed that identification of isolated speech, sound, and of continuous speech. Language production and conversational interaction can be viewed as consisting in 4 major stages: conceptualizing a thought to be expressed, formulating a linguistic plan, articulating the plan, and monitoring one's speech. These various stages will be examined in the part production of the speech and language, as we have discussed that serial versus parallel models and implementing linguistic plans. And as far as the conversational interaction is concerned, the structure of conversation, conversational skills, and conversational settings are the part of this conversational interaction. Thank you, dear student. I hope that the topic is clear to you all. Take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.